all of that logistical stuff out of the way, let's go ahead and dive in to our content today. We are so thrilled again that you are here. So we'd like to get to know you all a little bit and see who's in the room. So if in the chat, if you could go ahead and put your name, your role, and where you're from, we would love to see who's with us. So you can add that in the chat. And I'll give a couple seconds for everyone to do that. It's great. Thank you, Allison. Up now, they're trickling in. We've got someone from, we got Illinois represented, Maryland, Missouri, South Carolina, South Dakota, Ohio. Great. We're excited that you're here. Go ahead and keep adding where you're from in the chat. And while you're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our presenters today. So I am joined by Dr. Stacy Hurt, who is our Knowledge and Development Lead for the Progress Center, Stephen Prater, who's our Intensive Technical Assistance Lead for Progress, and Katie McClintock, our Instructional Designer for Progress. We also are joined from some panelists who I will go ahead and introduce when we get to that. And we would also love to hear, in addition to where you're from as you're finishing that up, why you decided to join today's session. And so for that, we're actually going to turn to a Jamboard. So in the chat, we are going to add a link to our Jamboard. Thank you so much, Katie. So you can click that link and that will bring you there. And this is where we're going to have space to document some of our ahas and wonderings as we're listening to our panel discussion, but just to get us used to Jamboard in case it's been a little while since you've used it or you've never used it before, I'll quickly go through and show you how to maneuver around here. So in order to navigate through the different pages of the Jamboard, you're going to click this right-hand button that's on the side. And this is going to help you scroll through. You'll see some of the responses from our prior session, but we can just go ahead and add in there. So right now we're on the second page, which is around why you chose to join us today. And so in order to enter response, you're going to go to this left-hand side where you'll see some different icons with different options. If you click this sticky note, that will pop up a place where you can type in your response. You can change the color of the sticky note if you're so inclined. And then when you're ready to post it, you just click save and that will post it up there. So we're going to go ahead and make some of these responses from earlier a little bit smaller so there's space for you all, but we would love for you to add in why you chose to join today's session. We know that there's a lot of content that's being covered today and are interested about why you chose us. So I'll give a couple seconds for people to add their responses. And once you're done with that, do keep this Jamboard open because we will be returning to it again kind of once we get to our panelist conversation. But from what I'm seeing so far, it looks like some of you at least are responsible for some different PD sessions in your schools or your districts. You're providing professional development, looking for some materials to help support, getting tips for delivering training, working with the special education team and looking for ways to support them. So excellent. We are going to cover some of that content today that we hope are going to be helpful for you in your roles. So to that end, let's look at our objectives for today's session. So we're going to be identifying different progress resources that can help with developing and implementing IEPs that promote progress. And we're also going to talk about some practical activities that you can use with in-service or pre-service teachers to help build their knowledge and capacity of educational programming. And we're going to hear from our panelists about some ways that they're already doing this work so that you can get some ideas on what exactly this might look like. But before we get to that, we want to set the stage with some of the things that we've learned by talking with educators across the country about the professional development that they've received. So to that end, I'm going to turn it to Stacy to share some of what we've learned there.
Okay. Hi, again, I am Stacy Hurt. I serve as the Knowledge Development Lead for the Progress Center. So last summer, the Progress Center conducted focus groups with 66 participants representing special education, general education, administrators, and related service providers. So yes, I conducted like 13 focus groups last summer. These participants, they ranged from 13 grade levels, so it included kindergarten, and we covered the Midwest, Northeast, Southeast, Southwest, and West. So essentially we captured a sample from all across the country. So one of the questions we teased out for this session is we asked participants how they felt about their professional learning. So to no surprise, responses were mixed, but surprisingly, 47% shared that they did not agree with that statement. These participants shared that they did not receive ongoing, high quality, and/or professional learning that supported students with disabilities. So I pulled out a few comments, the first being quote 1, a participant shared, "My staff receives 0 PD," and we're talking about supporting students with disabilities here. "If I go to a training, I bring it back and I have to show them the training. So most of the trainings that my district offers me are for general educators, and I'm not totally utilizing that." Quote 2, "Most training offered is not specific to students with disabilities. Any special education PD is usually out of district and I have to pay for it." So I don't know if you've experienced anything like this, but that stood out to me during those focus groups. Next slide. So what do we learn? So through these focus groups and professional learning efforts, we have learned to focus on the why, not just the how. And that is, in essence, when we go to develop and implement high quality professional programming. 2, make no assumptions about what educators know. So I'm not just talking about gen ed here, I'm also talking about our special educators. 3, provide educators with space and time to reflect. So go very slow at first so you can go fast. And when we say that, we mean to gradually release the content, perhaps layer these modules and tip sheets as you deliver them. And don't just email the Progress Center website, actually have some training to support this learning. Next, provide access to ongoing practice-based high quality professional learning. We'll get more into this later with the panel, but what we mean here is providing synchronous, asynchronous training, ongoing, and then proactive coaching. So not just in August training your staff, but having that ongoing feedback loop throughout the year. And then last, build educator fluency by offering multiple entry points. So actually customize the delivery to your new teachers, your special educators, your seasoned teachers, and then also your general ed providers. So next, I'd like to introduce Stephen Prater, and he's going to share some of our progress resources.
Yeah, hi everybody. Glad you're here today. Again, my name is Stephen Prater, and I am the lead for our intensive technical assistance team. So we are the team that goes out and works with schools and districts and provides training and resources and things like that. What I wanted to highlight here is just go through real quick, because in a minute when we have our panel discussion, we're going to talk about several of these. So I just wanted to point those out so you're kind of familiar with them. So first things first is all of these things are on our website, promotingprogress.org. Just so you know, we are an OSEP funded center. So basically what that means is we get money from the federal government, and we hire the best experts in special education in the country, and they help us develop these resources. So these, even though these are free resources, they're very, very high quality, very good, and very helpful. And that's the feedback we've gotten too. So just know that these are all free for you to use, download, go to as many times as you want, print them out, whatever you need to do. They're free for you to use as you would like in your trainings and things like that in your districts. So some of the things I wanted to point out is our tip sheets. So those are kind of in the top in the middle there. There's three examples of those, but our tip sheets are they highlight each area of the IEP. So the 7 required areas of the IEP, and also there's one more about transition services also that we have just put out. So there's 8 of those total now, but they're very quick reference guides. They all give like a highlight of what the actual law and IDEA says, Then we give you tips about implementing that or developing whatever the part of the IEP is. And then we also give you links to other resources. So those are really good quick starting resources for anybody. And then right below those, there are a couple of our examples of our parent tip sheets that we have. So these parent tip sheets, we have one about the IEP team, and we also have one about the IEP itself, the components of the IEP. And so those are written in much clearer and simpler language for parents. So those could also be good for general ed teachers who may not be as familiar with special education lingo and things like that. That could be a very simple resource for general education teachers. Near the top right over there, we have our instructional practice briefs. So these are very similar to our tip sheets because they're short references, short, quick references. They're a little longer than our tip sheets, maybe 3, 4, 5 pages long, and they concentrate on instructional practices. But what we did to develop those is we took some of the high leverage practices that were developed by the CEC and the Cedar Center. They came up with 22 high leverage practices that they said basically if you're a special ed teacher, you should be able to know about and demonstrate these 22 instructional practices. So we use some of those and we highlight those in these 6 instructional practice briefs that we have. We have them over planning instruction, delivering instruction, intensifying instruction, cognitive and metacognitive strategies, teaching social skills, and also I'm forgetting the 6th one, but there's 6 of those. So there's 6 of our instructional practice briefs there. Right below that is an example of a what we call a story from the classroom. So these stories from the classroom are very short videos that highlight some topic. It could be high expectations, or it could be student belonging, something like that, where you could show in the beginning of a training. And then they also come with like a guide, a discussion guide, where you could have questions and discussion about the video and about the topic. So it could be a good way to just start the conversation about some kind of topic before you launch into a professional development about it, for example. And then right below that is our examples of our modules. So our modules are our courses include these self-paced modules. So these self-paced modules are all around 30 minutes long. Not only are they these modules, but they also include resources that you can download about whatever the topic is. And also they'll link to you other resources, and you will get a certificate of completion at the end if you complete these modules. So so these are some of our things we wanted to highlight today. We'll talk about in our panel as well, but all these again are free to use as many times as you want at promotingprogress.org. All right, back to you, Alex.
Great, thanks, Stephen. And I know that we went through those quickly, but again, our panelists will talk more about some of these resources, and we'll also show you where you can access some of them on our website. But I want to return back to our Jamboard again. So hopefully you didn't close it out, but if you did, that's okay. We're going to add it back into the chat. Thanks so much, Katie. But now we're going to move on to our next page here. And there's a couple of questions that we have that we really want you to just be reflecting on as you're hearing our discussion that's going to be happening with the panel. We have 2 kind of guiding questions for you. So the first is, have you used any progress resources? This could be during professional development or in courses that you teach. If you've used resources before, we would love to be able to learn from you as well, and how exactly you've gone about doing that. So please include some information about what that has looked like so that others can get some ideas and inspiration. And then we also have another question, which is about how you can imagine using progress resources, again, in your PD or in any courses that you may teach. So as you're hearing our panelists talk, our hope is that you get some inspiration from them. So if there's something that you'd like to document and remember for later, feel free to put that in the Jamboard as well. Again, we can learn from others, and this Jamboard you'll continue to have access to. So you would be able to return to it at a later time. So we're not going to go ahead and dedicate specific time for you to fill out these questions, but just something to be reflecting on as we're going through our panelist conversation. So do keep that open as we're working through, as we're talking through the rest of this presentation. So place for you to share your thoughts. And with that, I want to make sure to introduce our panelists. And so I am joined today by a couple different people. And so I'm going to give everyone a chance to introduce themselves and talk about their experience that they have in special education. So we'll start with Dr. Minjin. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, thank you very much for having me. I started my education training and career in Tampa at the University of South Florida. I taught in Florida for about 6 years. Then I moved to back to Long Island, where I was able to teach special education, middle school students, a variety of disabilities. And then I became the coordinator and then finally the director of special education for about 20 years. I teach college classes, which I started about 14 years ago at SUNY Old Westbury and St. Joseph's University. And I teach courses on special education law, consultation around the whole IEP and IEP team and related service providers. And that's a little bit about myself.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Minjin. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can see all of the panelists here. Sarah Jorgensen, can you introduce yourself next, please?
Sure. Hi, thanks for having me. Sarah Jorgensen. I am starting my 29th year in education, special education. All that time, I have been a teacher to an administrator, and the past 20 years I've been in Nevada, located in Carson City. For 5 years, I have been with the Nevada State Public Charter School Authority, and we are a statewide charter authorizer with 40 plus schools and 80 plus campuses, ranging in grades K to 12. And we have approximately 6,000 students with disabilities enrolled in state public charter school schools across the state. Primary responsibility for me as an education programs professional on our school support team is to be the special ed coordinator. And that involves coaching, mentoring, technical assistance, providing professional development, monitoring schools, reporting associated with IDEA, and then also compliance. And then I'm also a Progress Center educator in residence. Thanks for having me.
Great, thanks so much. And lastly, Stephen, I know that you introduced yourself quickly, but also want to give you a chance to expand on your background as well, please.
Yeah. Again, I'm Stephen Prater. I'm located in Texas, right outside of Austin, Texas. I've lived and worked in Texas my whole life. And so I started out as a general education teacher. I taught middle school and high school math. And then I became a school psychologist, and that's how I kind of got into the special education realm. And so I was a school psychologist for many years, and then I became a campus administrator, and I was an assistant principal at a couple of different elementary schools. And then from there, I went up and worked at the State Department in Texas, where I was the manager of the technical assistance team in the special education department in Texas. And now I work for American Institutes for Research in the Progress Center. So I've been all up and down the educational landscape, and I'm glad to be here with you today. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Stephen. So let's start with a big picture question to kind of set the stage. So what are some of the big needs that you're seeing with the educators or administrators that you're working with? And perhaps, Vicki, we can start with you, and then we'll go to Sarah and Stephen.
I'm seeing that there's how to bridge the theory and content into actionable practice. So, there's so much content that special ed teachers, receive, and how can they practically apply that? And how can we give them continuous feedback on how that's going? Not just like annual evaluations, but really sort of, boots on the ground support. So that's one of the things, and in particular, specifically, is that IEP alignment and internal consistency of the IEP throughout the whole IEP. But I'm working mostly on looking at the IEP to present levels to the measurable goals. and how to really make sure that they don't just know that word, what is alignment, but can they actually have actively identified components and break it apart and put it back together? Because I always use this, I say, you just can't know alignment, you have to do alignment. You have to practice it, unpractice it, have examples, non-examples, etc. So that's what I'm focusing on as I see that there's a little bit of a gap there or a struggle for some teachers of various levels, even if they're novice, all the way to some more veteran teachers.
Great, thank you. And Sarah, how about what you've been seeing with the teachers and administrators that you work with? What are some of the big needs that you've been?
Sure. I think I can echo Vicki in that focus on that IEP. Really, that's our tool to really drive that that instruction. But I think nationally we know staffing is a challenge, and so along with that comes annual or within a school year, lots of turnover and transition, and people with various skill sets and knowledge, and so. Professional development, technical support, coaching, mentoring. And I think just kind of how can we support our staff throughout the school year. And then again, kind of leading to how can then we take that IEP, implement it, and provide some evidence-based and rigorous instruction that can really move the needle for our students' growth and achievement. And so those are kind of the big themes. And of course, there's probably it all kind of fits together, but where do we start kind of supporting our staff with IEP development, professional development, and supports?
Great, thanks, Sarah. And Stephen, how about you and the work that you're doing, either with your partnership sites or through the field initiated requests? What are some of the needs that you've been noticing?
Yeah, and I think it piggybacks on something Stacy touched on in her research that she did is just not assuming that people know this information, or assuming, or maybe they have assumptions that are incorrect. So I think that's what we find a lot is not only, people new to special education or education overall, or maybe even if they've been in the field for a while, just not having maybe that good pre-service training. So when they get into the field, they're learning by trial by fire, or just trying to take the information what they're given, and maybe don't have the depth or understanding that they should. So I think just being out there and just getting people back to these basics, getting back to these good practices, and using the good resources that we have to highlight, just these are the things you need. These are the important things. This is how you do this, instead of like trying to filter out all the different types of resources and things out there. These are the things people need to know. And if they know these things, then they can get better. They can keep practicing these things the right way and get better at them. That's how they're going to make a difference, not trying to latch onto something new every year.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious now about how you've used these progress resources to help you address some of these needs, what it's really looked like, and how you've used the resources in your courses or in your professional development and mentoring work, just to give people a sense of what this could look like. So Vicki, let's start with you, but how have you been embedding or utilizing the progress resources in your coursework?
What I started out doing, because I've been using them about a year, but in various courses. But how I started and where I'm at now is changed. I started by just linking into my syllabus and in the learning platform that we use for 2 different universities, 2 different platforms, the resources, and asking students to, when we're off, like week 1, we're offline, we're synchronous and asynchronous. So prepare by going into the module. I was just wondering if you could, for 1 second, go back to the slide that Stephen talked about, because this way I can pretty much,
Sure.
point a few things out. Is that possible?
Of course. Just give me one moment here while I pull that up. All right, so I'm going to move back to the other resources, this slide here.
Yes. So for example, I would assign one of the self-paced learning modules, for example, IDEA and IEP, from compliance to progress. And then I would have in class, we would talk about it. Then they would take the tip sheets, present levels of academic achievement and functional performance, that top tip sheet right there. And then we would go into a breakout room and sort of analyze the components. But what I found was, and then the next week I would add some more, maybe we'd do a webinar or look at the PowerPoint. We had discussions, but I had a gap of something I learned that I needed to add. There wasn't enough practice of using them and giving them practice sessions and really getting to the point that they knew it forward and backwards without even looking at any of those tip sheets. So I did use them. The students, I believe, enjoyed using them, but I didn't build in enough practice. So I felt I needed to add things when I move forward, and I have added some things to my syllabus coming forward. So
it sounds like your thinking around how best to utilize the resources has changed a little bit. Can you talk a little more about how you're anticipating embedding more of those practice opportunities that you were talking about?
So for example, in using some of the tip sheets and giving them present levels of performance and letting them see if they can break it apart. Do they have the components? And if they can see what the components are, what's not there and what needs to be added. What I also am adding now is before they do the videos, a pre-assessment that I've taken. Now you have some built in, you have some very good checkpoints and some good quizzes, but I'm going to sort of expand and add a little bit more in the front and then at the end, and then expect them to give in the certificate, because you know how students are. Sometimes they'll go through the whole module. And so I think that will help. So adding in a lot more practice of present levels and goals from forwards and backwards. I'm doing a lot more of that. I'm building it into some other mock CSEs and mock CSE evaluation. So I'll build the resource into the evaluation. So I'll say, when you're going into your team of your mock IEP session, go to, and then I'll tell them what resource to go to so that they can have it. It's not like I'm asking them to do something without having a lot of practice and a lot of materials. They need it, because if you just ask them to do it, they're, you know, without that, I don't think you're going to get the quality that you really want. So the mock IEP meeting, the development of scavenger hunt. I've developed a scavenger hunt using your material. So at first they're just finding out all these different resources. So really just getting deeper and deeper into them, using them while they're doing analysis and implementation. And start with not their own IEPs at first. So I did that at first, use their own IEPs, but I felt they weren't ready. So Steve, I think, is going to bring up some more things later about when to do that, when to use theirs. But I start out with examples that aren't theirs at first.
It's really nice to hear how you're thinking, or how your use of the resources has also evolved, because it's always nice to learn from others. I'm wondering, and you mentioned it in our last session, I was curious then, can you just talk a little bit more about the scavenger hunt? Like what is that activity?
So a scavenger hunt is using probably what I think are like the top resources centers that are national centers, your center, the National Center for Intensive Intervention, and What Works Clearinghouse, those centers. So I go into them myself. I find very deep information inside of them that they can't just click on the thing, say, oh, that's the answer. It's at this website on this page. They have to go into it. They have to read, maybe a couple of paragraphs about something. They have to pull a piece of data out of it and then respond to a 10 to 15 question outline that I give them, and then they do enter their responses. So at the end of the course, I have a big reflection that they do. I have to say, between that and I teach special ed law, the actual case review that they have to do a case brief, those are their top two activities and learning opportunities that they say, boy, I love that we did that first, because it let me know every place I needed to be for the class. So that's how I do the scavenger hunt.
Great, thanks so much for sharing. And Stacy put in the chat, and I agree that that's such a great way to help build efficacy with pre-service teachers as well. So thanks for sharing. Sarah, let's talk a little bit more about your work and what that's looked like for in-service teachers that you've been working with. So how have you used the progress resources in your professional development or other coaching and mentoring that you've done?
Sure. Yeah. First off, kind of a little background. The SPCSA had some state monitoring findings, and we needed some technical assistance. So our SEA connected us with the Progress Center, and that started our work with the Progress Center. I've been partnering with Stephen, and I'll let Stephen kind of talk about the work that we've done collectively together, but how I've used a lot of the resources at the Progress Center is building off of the PD that was provided, but I use the resources in my coaching, mentoring. We do some grant and program risk monitoring that maybe requires some corrective action to clarify some thinking. I also provide monthly opportunities to discuss topical issues with special education providers throughout the Charter Authority. And I have used tip sheets along with the content as a resource to kind of have a prepackaged, ready to go materials that are quick and easy entry points. And then beyond that, modules on the website, which I love, are just about 30 minutes long and really get to the heart of the content. And it's never a one and done with our PD and our training, right? We are always learning new information, refining our thinking, clarifying our thinking. And the fact that all of this content is, vetted, aligned to IDEA, it really just helps to focus everybody on the same information. And so, and I find it very easy to navigate the website and to access the materials, and they're free. So, I spread the word far and wide, not only within our charter schools, but also within the state with my fellow special ed directors.
Great, thanks, Sarah. And Stephen, do you want to talk a little bit more about the professional development that you've done with Sarah and what that's looked like?
Yeah, and it's been great. To Sarah's credit, it's been great partnering with Nevada. She's been very receptive to all the things we want to do, has great input and ideas about how to make it work for their teachers and their charter schools. So just want to give her kudos for that. But so what we did last year is we did 2 different 3-part learning series. We did one in the fall and one in the spring. In the fall, we concentrated on IEP development, and we did a 3-part learning series about that. That included the compliance to progress modules that we have, and then also the PLAF module and the tip sheets and the goals, the measurable annual goals and the tip sheet. So basically what we did there is we tried to have people watch the modules ahead of time. So we almost did like a flipped classroom thing. And they'd watch the module ahead of time and then get the information, look at the tip sheets also. And then when they would come to the what we call practice sessions, that's where we would kind of we would make sure everybody was on the same page with the information. Like, so for example, if we're talking about goals, and the module talks about here are the essential parts of a goal, we would make sure everybody understands that, like everybody's on the same page with our essential parts of a goal. But the most of the time in that practice session is used to look at their own goals or to look at their own PLAFs and say, like, okay, now look at what you've written in the past. Do you have these elements? Or if not, like, what would you do differently? And so examining their own practices and also getting in small groups to talk with other people, like what's going on in yours, because the charter schools, they're, you know, spread across all the states, you know, even though I know Sarah tries to align the things that they do as much as possible, they're still, you know, some people are still doing things a little differently than others. So that way you look at what other people are doing, you get ideas, you feel you're in the same boat, you know, just learning from each other. So that's what those practice sessions are really for, is not really to regurgitate the same information that was from the module and the tip sheets, but to take that information, apply it, and get feedback, you know, from your peers and from us during the sessions about that. So that's in the fall we did about IEP development. We did the same thing in the spring, but about instructional practices. So we did we used the modules about instructional practices on preparing, delivering, and intensifying instruction. And then there's also instructional practice briefs that go with each of those. So again, the same thing, we'd have them watch the modules, look at the instruction practice briefs ahead of time. But then when they would come to the practice session, we would say, okay, this practice, you know, delivering instruction talked about explicit instruction. Now let's talk about implicit instruction. How have you done that? What did you learn differently? Talk to your peers. You know, what are you going to do differently going forward? You know, things like that. And I think the one that was the most helpful from what I was feedback from Sarah was the intensifying instruction. So like if what you're doing with the student is not working now, how do you know when to make a change and how to make that change? So that was a really a good practice session with using those resources. Mm-hmm.
And Stephen, I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about when you've had people bring their own IEPs versus when you used like a sample IEP. Because I know that Vicki talked about some of the ways that has worked in her setting. So I'm wondering about how that's worked with what you've been doing with Nevada.
Yeah, and Sarah may want to jump in too, but I like the idea of people using their own IEPs because I mean, I just think that, you know, they can, I don't know, it internalizes and personalizes it a little bit more, you know, like everybody's there to learn. So you're not getting judged or you're not getting evaluated on your work. You're examining your own work, and then maybe you're taking feedback in and things like that. But it's not like, you know, you're showing your principal or somebody like what your IEP is. You know, you're just trying to better yourself, and we're all there to better each other. So, but you know, and sometimes when I've done like a field initiative request, you know, or maybe at a conference or something where people aren't all from the same school or from the same district or something, and then you want people to kind of look at a similar document, then yes, that would be a good time to use maybe like an example. And I know the Progress Center has, we have example ones that people can use. That way everybody's kind of talking the same language and looking at the same thing. But if it's possible, I like the idea of using their own IEPs. That way they can know like what they've done in the past and know kind of they need to change and move forward in the future.
Yeah, and to add on to that, I many times my staff will hear me say, inspect and correct. We have to inspect what we're doing and see if we're doing it the way we should be doing it, and correct, right? And that opportunity to take the time to look at the IEP that you've constructed, and or getting feedback from your peers. That self-monitoring really helps to kind of see where are my strengths and where do I need to improve, and that's how we drive that improvement, and that IEP, it really drives that instruction. So I think it's valuable not only as an individual but as a school team to even inspect and correct within each other's IEPs as well. That's practical. It's meaningful and actionable and drives results.
Thanks for sharing, Stephen and Sarah.
I just wanted to clarify, if I could. I didn't make it clear the entry point of my students. The students I have are from general education, and they need to take this class to get their master's, or they could have come from other fields. Some of them have gotten their BAs in special education, but they haven't finished their internship. You know, they're really just beginning or finishing up their education, but not, and maybe they're doing permanent sub work, but they don't really all have their own class or their own IEP. So that's why even having them bring in their teachers that they're working with IEPs, that, you know, that could be an issue. So that's why I say we use IEPs that aren't theirs at first, because they don't have enough experience. Even being on a committee on special education meeting, IEP meetings in certain states, they call it. So that's why I don't use, even if they maybe just started teaching their own IEP, because they haven't. And that's something I think we need to do at the university level, is give them what Steve and what Sarah are talking about, multiple practices, examples, non-examples, tear it apart, put it back together, feedback loop. It just really needs to happen, because some students are getting out there without enough of that, and they'll just be hit with, you have to develop these 10 kids IEPs, and your resources. To me, that's the bridge. That's the bridge that needs to be used to have good outcomes, as Stacy was saying too. Sarah, excuse me, Stacy.
I think it's very helpful to hear about some of the different things that you've utilized, and then when you've used sample IEPs versus when you've used people's actual IEPs. So thanks for going into that. I'm curious about any reactions that you've had, that you've heard your teachers that you work with have to the resources. Have they given you any indication on what they've liked, what has been impactful for them? I know that Sarah, you and Stephen have administered some feedback surveys to get that types of information from the teachers you're working with. So any lessons or things that you've learned from that feedback?
Sure. If you're monitoring chat, one of my colleagues is participating today, and she definitely embraced Progress Center content and learning. And Stephen also mentioned, besides not only the survey responses, which have all been wonderful as far as the content and the competency of the instructors, the intensifying instruction session that we had this past spring, which was the last in our 3-part learning series, the level of participation over that content, we just ran out of time. We had to cut some content short. I would say we had great conversations, great discussions. I wish I could have extended the time, but everybody, I think, really also valued the fact that we were offering this opportunity to them as well. I think that speaks back to sort of that first slide that Stacy went over regarding professional development being non-existent or minimally effective, for most people across the country. And so having that opportunity, specific opportunity with the Progress Center and our learning sessions, but also then carrying forward that content and resources to others, to charter school staff and to my peers. So I think it's well received, and I think people are very thankful to find these resources.
Sarah, I know we're running up on time here to get through a couple of other things, but I just want to end perhaps quickly, if there's any advice that you would have to those who have joined our session today about utilizing the resources when they're working with pre-service or in-service teachers. What recommendations might you have for them? Vicki, let's start with you, and then we'll go.
Okay, I think what you started with, go slow and go in depth versus broad, because at first you could look at this. One of my professor friends basically was saying, oh my gosh, first I didn't even know it was here, then it was so much. So go slow, take a resource at a time, use it as you need, and then have good practice behind it and good feedback. So I would say that developing a resource notebook is something that I've had all my classes do. Your resources are a main part of that whole notebook, and incorporating them at different entry points. And I really believe that modeling and practice just is the missing piece, because we have short amount of time, and Sarah was saying it, we have a limited amount of time. We need to use it wisely, and build in the practice street and build in a framework to use it. specifically in each step along the way.
Thanks, Vicki. Sarah, any recommendations that you would have for folks?
Sure, I can echo what Vicki said. Maybe do a self-assessment, see where your biggest needs are, and then turn to materials on the Progress Center site. And that's your entry point. You know, focus on, like what we did. We focused on IEP development, present levels, specially designed instruction, goals and objectives, you know, because there's a lot to digest there. And I think that there's resources that all work together. So the modules, the tip sheets, the practice briefs. And then I also like the fact that many of these resources do connect to our other technical assistance centers, like the National Center for Intensive Intervention, so that then you can, at a later time, dive deeper into content there and cross-reference content and just kind of build your knowledge and your PD library. So I think that those are great entry points for those looking to utilize the material and content on the Progress Center website.
Great, thank you all so much. I'm sure that people have enjoyed hearing from you and learning from your experiences. I'm going to turn to just showing where some of these resources are for those who are not familiar with the website, in particular where the online modules are, because you've heard both Vicki and Sarah and Stephen all referenced the learning modules. So if you go to our website, promotingprogress.org, you'll see that there's this tab at the top here called Training, which is where all of our modules are located, and as well as archived webinars. And there's lots of different topics here. So there's some modules about the education law. There's the ones that Stephen and Sarah were talking about regarding instruction, planning, delivering, and intensifying instruction. There's, if you scroll down further, there's the different components of the IEP with the measurable annual goals and the PLAFs. So lots of different topics that are available here. And again, they're all free to access. So in order to do that, you just click whichever one you're interested in. When you scroll down, it tells you a little bit about the course, about the different related resources. This is where the tip sheets or implementation guides would be. And then if you go to the top here in this Go to Online course, it's going to bring you to our learning management system where you would create an account if you haven't done this before. Again, quick, free to do. And then once you have created your account, you would log in. And this would then show you, it would bring you to, in this case, a particular module that you selected. But if you go to your dashboard, you can see all of the different courses that you've been enrolled in and some of the different content. So it's all housed in one spot. You can access it at any time. These are all asynchronous modules that, again, you can utilize when it fits your schedule. So that's where they're housed on our website if you are interested in looking at some of these resources. And then I wanted to turn as well to looking at some of the new things that are coming from Progress. And so we have been working after learning the various different takeaways that we've heard from the focus groups that Stacy mentioned, as well as the different field work that we've been doing with our partnership sites and field initiated requests. And we've heard a lot about people needing to return back to the basics, that we not assuming that people know this content no matter how long that they've been in the field, and the need for multiple exposures over time. And so we've developed some practice-based activities to help with that really align nicely with all of our other resources. They're not yet available, but they will be coming soon. So stay tuned to our website if you're interested in learning about any of these. So there's 3 practice-based activities that will be coming. The first is a way of looking at our tip sheets. So you also heard our panelists talk about how you can't just give the tip sheet and then that being people's exposure to it, but it's really giving people time to digest, to look at it and digest it. So this is an activity that will help them do that. And I'll go through that in more depth. And then the next activity is getting to know your IEP. So giving people an opportunity to look in their local IEP document to understand where the different required components of the IEP actually appear, where perhaps they may be, it might not always be where you would anticipate it being. And so that's a nice opportunity for people to really explore their document. And then the last activity here is getting to some of the points, again, that our panelists made about that importance of the alignment and that internal consistency. So this is an activity where participants are able to explore one of their IEPs, look to see if everything that's in their PLAF statement, how is that seen in the measurable annual goals? Are there things in the goals that perhaps are not in the PLAFs? How does this all connect to the services? Do we have an internally consistent IEP? And it's a nice opportunity to work through and really examine various different IEP documents. So that's another activity as well. So to kind of dive in as we wrap up here, just to give a sense of what these documents are, well, these activities will look like. So they come with a facilitator guide and a participant guide. And these are some screenshots from the facilitator guide. So it tells you a little bit about the purpose of the activity, the time commitment, who your suggested audience is. In this case, again, we're looking at how to break down those IEP tip sheets. And so typically this is an activity that we would do in about 15 to 20 minutes or so. And you may have actually seen parts of this in some of the other sessions if you've attended other sessions over the last 2 days. But this activity can be done with any of the tip sheets. So you can select a tip sheet to focus on depending on what your content is. We found that's really helpful for many of them, but especially for the overview of statements of services and aids. So if you joined our IEP 201 session yesterday with Tessie and Sarah, you may have seen little bits of this. And as part of what the activity actually would look like, so we want to give people a chance to review the tip sheet and look through what does IDEA say about this particular component. Give people an opportunity to highlight the definitions, to take note of what's kind of standing out to them, what reflections or takeaways they might have, and then giving people an opportunity to discuss it. So to go into either small groups or partnerships, depending on how many people are in your session, but a chance to talk about that and then come together as a whole group and answer, addressing any participant questions, really reinforcing those main ideas of the tip sheets. And so you can see the timing breakdown for these various components as well. And then as an optional kind of extension activity, there's also the opportunity to have people write about what they think IDEA is saying about that particular component and sharing that. So that's a little bit about all of the various different resources available in progress and how you might utilize them in your professional development or the courses that you're working with. As we come to a close here, I'm interested to hear kind of what resource you're looking forward to including in your professional learning opportunities. So we're going to go ahead and launch a poll so that you can think about which one kind of resonated with you. Are you most looking forward to? Thinking about the tip sheets, the instructional practice briefs, our online learning modules, our universal TA activities. And if there's anything else, then you can go ahead and put that in the chat. Right, I'm seeing a lot of interest in our tip sheets, as well as really all of the kind of equally amongst the other resources as well, with the learning modules and the practice briefs. Great. Thank you all so much for completing that. And again, if there's anything else that you want to add, you can put that in the chat as well. And don't forget to stay connected to us. So you can find all of these resources, again, available on our website, promotingprogress.org. You can also connect with us at Facebook or on Twitter at K12 Progress. So a great opportunity to stay up to date about what's going on with our center. If you're interested in any of these universal TA activities that we just talked about, again, those will be posted as soon as they're finalized. So keep an eye out for those on our website. Otherwise, all of the material that we went through today was produced by underneath the U.S. Department of Education, Office of Special Education Programs.